about what I call my 8 rules for writing. And these rules are meant to help you to be better at choosing your words wisely. So they're all about trying to be more specific with what you say and more direct with your language. These are simple rules that you can follow, and each one will make your writing more professional and more academic in tone and style. It's important to note that these rules only apply to essay writing. They don't necessarily apply to, your speaking or your emails or any other sort of writing or speaking. But in an academic essay, you have the time and the space to be able to pick your words carefully. So the idea is, if you have the time and the space to pick your words carefully, you should do so. Okay. So first is about the second person, you. So I don't mind if you use the word I when you're talking about yourself, but I do have a problem when you say the word you, because that means you're talking about me. So, here's some examples of why this is problematic. So, for instance, if you said, when you go on Twitter, and I haven't updated this since it became X or whatever. Anyway, when you go on Twitter, you see this. Well, you're making an assumption, first of all. So when you say, when you go on Twitter, well, I, Miss Foster, do not go on Twitter. I don't have social media. It's just not for me. So, anything you have to say after that is null and void, because your assumption is incorrect that I go on Twitter. So you're assuming something about me which isn't true, and you're assuming that I see a lot of disagreements among feminists on Twitter, and that's simply not true. And yes, all of my examples have to do with, like, feminism or whatever. I was just in a mood the day that I made this, so whatever. If you're talking about yourself instead of your reader, replace it with I or me. So instead of saying when you go on Twitter, say when I go on Twitter. And in that case, I'm assuming that, if you're saying that, you go on Twitter, that you do. And so therefore you're not making that assumption. Okay? So when you're talking about yourself, don't make it about me, make it about you. Another example, when you're trying to conform to gender norms, you might find it difficult. Again, making an assumption. I don't try to conform to gender norms. I'm very feminine, but that's not the point. Anyway, so when you say the word you, again, you're making an assumption, but if it doesn't apply to you either, but it does conform to people in general, then replace it with people and they. When people are trying to conform to gender norms, they might find it difficult. And then in that way, I'm not disagreeing on the basis of it's not true for either of us, because you're just saying it about people in general. So I can't really argue with that. Okay? Another example is the you should. And you should is really preachy, okay? When you tell people you should, they tune out because nobody likes to be told what to do. So instead of saying you should not expect people to conform to gender norms. The best thing to do in the case of should is to replace it with we. which sounds more like we're in this together, right? It's less accusatory. It's less telling people what to do. It's just, we should all do this. It's a general thing. So we should not expect people to conform to gender norms. And then there's the hypothetical you. Imagine you have a daughter. Honestly, hypotheticals are just not that persuasive. Use something real. There's no reason to use a hypothetical if there's a real situation out there happening with this particular case. So while I understand wanting to put a person in someone else's shoes, if they're not able to empathize with a real situation that's really happening and they need to consider themselves first, they're not going to be very well persuaded by a hypothetical anyway. So, or anything really. Just instead of making a hypothetical, just talk about the real situation, okay? And then there's no reason to have the hypothetical you, okay? So there is no reason to ever use the word you. You can replace it with I if you're talking about yourself, people if you're talking about people in general, or we if you, need to say, we should do something. It helps you be more specific in your language, and it conveys what you really mean, because you don't really mean me specifically, Miss Foster, you're one reader. But that's what you mean when you say you. So when you don't know your entire audience, which, your papers, you have to consider that it's going to be a general audience, even though you know that realistically it's just me. But you have to be writing it as if there is a general audience who will see it. And so you don't know your entire audience. You don't know if, if you is going to refer to them or not. Okay. So you don't want to make assumptions. You don't want to sort of, be accusatory. And so just eliminate the word you. One way to do this is when you're typing your paper, you can hit Control F, or if you're using a Mac, I think it's Command F. And that'll pop up a search bar, and you can type the word you into it, and it'll highlight all of your yous. Okay, and then you can go and replace them one by one with whatever it is that you really mean. Okay, so it's an easy way to fix this and to make your writing sound more professional. The next one is about the word things. Now, things is a vague word. It can mean anything. So, things is, the thing about. Now, I say the thing about all the time. The thing about this and the thing about that and the thing about this other thing. I say it all the time. But in my writing, I try to avoid that. So, you don't have to say, the thing about this, you can just say it directly. So instead of saying the thing about feminism is that it requires understanding, you can just say feminism requires understanding. And that is more direct. It eliminates the vague word things. It just sounds more professional. Another example, I may sometimes see things differently than other feminists. Oh yeah? What kind of things? What things, specifically? And a lot of people say, well, after that sentence, I'm going to say what things. But then why preface it with that you're going to tell me the specific things? Why not just get to the specific things? You can, sort of just eliminate or replace the word. So instead of saying, I sometimes see things differently, I may sometimes have a different opinion than other feminists. So in that way, you're at least using a more specific word. Instead of saying, things, it's opinions. And then get into specifics. You can. So another example is feminists sometimes say things that I don't agree with. Oh yeah, what kind of things? And again, well, I'm gonna go into the things, but okay, but why present the idea of things? Why not just use a more specific word? Feminists sometimes express opinions that I don't agree with. Again, opinions is more specific than things. And last example, there are many things people don't understand about feminism. Oh yeah, what kind of things? People often don't understand the goals of feminism. Goals is much more specific than things. Okay. So sometimes you have to do a little rearranging. Sometimes you have to choose a different word. Sometimes you can just eliminate, the sentence altogether in some cases if it's vague enough. But I have a 100% track record of finding a better word than things. Okay? So there's always a better word. There's always a more specific word. Please don't replace things with stuff because stuff is just as vague. Okay? Oh, I should also say with you that you also includes your and yourself and all of the forms of you. But things doesn't encompass the other forms of things. So everything is fine because at least that's giving a number of things. Anything, something, those words are acceptable. Just things by itself is not. So there is no situation where you have to use the word thing. You can always replace it with a more specific word, and I'd like you to do so. It really helps you be more specific in your language choices, and it conveys more what you really mean. Okay? The next rule has to do with the phrase, in today's society. And this is a phrase that gets overused a lot. In today's society, people are able to be more judgmental because of social media. Okay. Yeah. And sometimes they replace it with something like, in the modern world, or nowadays. And really, there's no reason to put that. Because let me posit something for you. If I say people are able to be more judgmental because of social media, do you think that I'm talking about back then? Do you think I'm talking about, a different society than today's? No. And not just because I'm saying social media, but because I'm speaking in the present tense. So, therefore, you don't really need to say in today's society or any other form of in today's society, okay? So, unless you're switching between here's how it was back then and now it's like this, there's no reason to orient people in, when you're talking about. So, and even then, you're going to say, then it was this way, now it's this way. You don't have to say, back then it was like this, and in today's society it's like this. The reason that I say that is because in today's society comes with a lot of baggage. What we really mean when we say in today's society is that sort of the world's going to hell in a handbasket. That sort of the degradation of today's world that used to be so great, back when we had racism or something, but today man, we're really going downhill. Which is not true. We're not going downhill because, like, for instance, we don't have as much racism. So, like, you want to avoid this sort of connotation because it fits into what we call the Golden Age fallacy. The Golden Age fallacy being that things were way better back then and now it's so bad. And that's simply not true. The world wasn't better back then. The world is not worse now. It's just different. And old people don't like change, mostly. So I want you to avoid using that phrase because you want to avoid that fallacy and that baggage that is associated with it. And besides the fact that it actually doesn't mean anything, it's kind of an empty phrase. So don't use any variation on in today's society. It's an empty placeholder phrase. It doesn't actually mean anything except grumpy old man. And you don't want to be perceived that way. So it helps you be more direct in your language and to make everything you say more specific. Okay. The next is generalization. So an example of that would be there are many reasons why women should have equality. So you're generalizing, okay? Many reasons does not give me any specifics. And again, like with things, people say, well, I'm going to list the reasons. Well, why not just list the reasons? Why do you have to preface it with there are many reasons? Say, like, women should have equality because, and start listing those reasons. Don't say there are many reasons and then list them. Just give the reasons. And you can say at the end, like, that's just a few of those reasons that I'm not going to get, I'm not going to get into the others, but here's the ones I'm focusing on. You can sort of do that a little bit. But, it's just going to be way more direct to just get into the specifics, okay, from the start, rather than having many reasons. Many is one of those buzzwords for generalization. I recommend, like with you and things, just using the find feature, so the Control F or the Command F, and and finding the word many as well, and trying to eliminate it, because that's gonna get rid of a lot of your generalizations too. A variation of that would be a lot. There are a lot of different ways. Oh yeah, what kind of ways? There are a lot of different ways to gain equality for women. Instead of saying that, just say we can gain equality for women by, and start going into the specific different ways. And again, you can kind of say, like, among others, and among others at the end can really do wonders. And then another example, there are many factors that go into developing equality for women. Many factors. How many? What kind of factors? For instance, instead of saying that, just say, when developing equality for women, we must consider. Get into the specifics right away. Don't say there are many factors. Or one of my favorite ones, equality for women is a really big issue. Really big issue is basically meaningless. How big? Give the scope, okay? Instead of saying it's a really big issue or saying it's an issue at all, just get into it. Women still don't have equality, even in developed countries, even though gender equality affects everyone negatively. It's so much more powerful than saying it's a really big issue. So just be more specific from the start. Don't preface with really big issue and many factors and a lot of different ways and many reasons. Get rid of all that and get right into the specifics. Okay? So instead of giving those empty generalizations, speak only in specific. It's going to make you so much more direct in your language and more powerful, and to make everything you say more specific. Okay? The next one is what I call signposting, and it's not just me that calls that. I got that from somewhere, a book or something. Anyway, signposting is basically when you tell the reader what's coming. Okay, so like a signpost that you would see on a road, you go, there's an essay coming, and there's I'm going to talk about stuff. Coming up. And the thing is that signposting is really good for things like speeches, where you're trying to orient the reader, or you're trying to orient the listener in where you are in your argument and what's coming up, and it allows you to build in repetition, because when people are listening to things, they're only catching maybe, like a certain percentage of it. And so if there's nothing for them to see, sometimes, they're not going to get it all. And so it's really good to repeat and to orient your listener. So signposting can be really good for speech making. But for essay writing, not so good. Okay? Because your reader doesn't need you to orient them in where they are. They can see visually where they are. And you don't need to repeat things because people can reread. Okay? So signposting looks a little bit like this. In this essay, I'm going to talk about. Why say that you're going, that, first of all, don't ever say that you're writing an essay in your essay. Don't refer to your essay in your essay. There's no reason to do that. In fact, Control F and delete essay from your essay. Okay? There's no reason to talk about your essay in your essay. In this essay, I'm going to talk about talking ahead. It's just not necessary. So instead of saying, I'm going to talk about what feminism means to me, just talk about what feminism means to you and get it over with. Just tell me what you're going to, just don't tell me what you're going to say, just say it. Another example is one that comes up a lot when you're using like quotes from sources in your papers. So like, feminism is a choice. This quote shows that choices are at the heart of feminism. First of all, you don't need to tell me what any quote shows. If you've given the quote if you've given enough context for the quote ahead of time, and you give me the quote, and then I've gotten it. Okay? There's no reason to explain a quote to me. If that's the case, then you haven't given enough context, or you haven't chosen an appropriate quote, or enough to quote. So you don't need to say this quote shows that. It's a signpost saying explanation of quote ahead. So instead of saying this quote shows that, you want to say, you want to add to the idea. So you give the quote, you add to the idea. So feminism is about choice. The opportunity to have choice is something that should be offered to all people. So you're adding to the idea that's given, or you can also bring it back to its relevancy to your. You can explain how it's relevant to what you're talking about by adding to the idea and building off of it. Okay. And the last signpost is one of my biggest pet peeves, besides you and things. And that is in conclusion. And in conclusion is what you write on your essay, for the conclusion when you're in middle school, and after that, you shouldn't be using it. If you need to write in conclusion in order to help yourself to write the conclusion, go ahead and do so, but I should not see it in the final draft, okay? So do not ever show me a paper with in conclusion in it, because I will just, blah. So please don't do that. And you can just eliminate it. You can just cross it out, like you could just backspace over it. Okay? There is no reason to have the conclusion. I know that it's the conclusion by the fact that, it's at the end and you're concluding. So instead of telling me what you're going to say, just say it, There's no reason to tell me what you plan to say. I will figure it out when I get there. So you don't need to tell me. It's going to help you be more direct and more specific. The next is what I call explaining the process, and that's when you explain the process of writing the paper or doing the research or thinking about the paper or, the process you took to get to the final idea, okay, that you're writing in your paper. You don't need to do this. That's behind the scenes stuff. That should be left backstage, right? Your reader should not see it. Okay, so an example of what this looks like, when I was doing research for this paper, so again, you shouldn't be referring to your essay or your paper in your essay or paper, so take it out. And also, your reader doesn't need to know that you did research. Another example, I found an article. Good for you, but I don't need to know about that as the reader. I give you a pat on the back for doing research, for writing your paper, and for finding articles, but I don't need to hear about it. Okay, all I need is the finished product. You found an article, use the article. Don't tell me about finding the article. Okay. Another example, as I was writing this paper, I started thinking about, okay, good on you, writing your paper, good on you, thinking about things, but again, I don't need to hear about it. I just need the finished product. I need to know the product of that writing and thinking, not that you were writing and thinking. And this one, I kid you not, have had this more than once. I asked my mom how she would write this paper, and she said that she would talk about, I applaud you for using your resources, asking your mom or your sister or your brother or your dad or your roommate or your friend or whatever for advice, and more power to you for doing that. I don't need to hear about it. You can tell me in class, but I don't need to hear about it in your paper. So just give the results of that conversation. You had a conversation, it gave you an idea, you included that idea in your paper, but you don't need to put that you had the conversation, you just need to put the idea that the conversation led to. Now, if you really want to give your mother credit, she had a really good idea and you want to give her credit in your paper, you can cite it as an interview. Okay? All right. So, and yes, I've had people do that. Whatever. So instead of telling me about your writing and research process, just give me the result. Instead of saying that you did these things, tell me what those things led to. Okay. Helps you be more direct and more specific. Next is what I call repeating the assignment. So, I'm going to have you do me a favor and write a paragraph, just a short paragraph about why you chose or just thinking about your topic for the research project. So like, why did you choose to write about what you're writing about for the research project? Was there a story behind it? What is its meaning for you? Go ahead and pause the video and do that for me right now. Okay. So now that you're back, I assume that a lot of you, probably wrote something like, the reason I chose to write about. The story behind it is. The meaning for me is. Now, you have been taught throughout your educational career to repeat the assignment. It is not your fault that you do so. It is the fault of previous teachers. Now, the reason that they ask you to do that is because they want you to be thinking about your reader as someone who may not have heard the question. The problem is that it makes it often people have done this incorrectly. And so what results is there's clearly a question and the reader doesn't know what it was, but it's still clear that it's there. If you start with the reason I chose to write about, then, yeah, there's a question there. And I might not know what it is, but I can guess that it's, why did you choose to write about? And you want to write like there is no assignment, okay? So you can simply eliminate the assignment language. Instead of saying the reason I chose to write about feminism is because I'm really passionate about it, you can just say feminism is a passion of mine. Much more direct, much more simple, much more to the point. It still answers the question, but it acts like the question didn't exist. Okay? Instead of saying the story behind it is that I'm a feminist, you can say you can just start your story, Instead of saying the meaning for me is that I've developed my own sense of feminism, just say I've developed my own sense of feminism. So yeah, you want to basically eliminate that assignment language. I've had I, for instance, assign a lot of papers that are analysis papers, and I have people who just repeat analysis like every third sentence, as if somehow that's going to transform what they're doing into analysis, where they tell me that, like, an analysis of this is really important because I'm analyzing it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, because it has the name analysis in the name of the paper, they say this, and it's not necessary. So don't use the assignment language. So, like, for instance, in your synthesis essays, hopefully you did not use the word synthesis. You didn't use the word synthesize. You didn't say I'm synthesizing my sources. Instead, you just did it. Okay? So, don't use the language I used to describe the assignment in the assignment, right? Like there is no assignment, okay? Right? Like you have just simply decided to write a paper about this for no reason other than you want to change people's hearts and minds. And so, don't use the language in my assignment sheets on your assignment, okay? That helps you be more direct in your language and to enhance your academic tone. Okay? Because otherwise, again, you sound like a middle schooler. You know, the reason I chose to write about this. No, don't do that. Okay? Just do the assignment. Don't tell me about the assignment in your assignment. Okay? I know what the assignment is, and I'll know if you have accomplished that task. You don't need to tell me that you're doing it. So, the final rule has to do with what I call defensiveness, which is where you say things like, to me, women are equal. Just my opinion. Just to me, personally, I believe, it's just my belief, it's just my personal, private belief, and some people might disagree, and everyone has different opinions, everyone has a right to their own opinion, but my opinion, it's just mine. Please don't yell at me, is that women are equal. And it comes from this place of like, please don't yell at me. It comes from a place of like, we're not supposed to offend people. We're not supposed to like say things that might, that people might disagree with, because if they disagree, they might be offended, and then they're gonna yell at us. But the problem with doing that in a rhetorical, persuasive, argumentative essay is that you are giving your reader an out to disagree. Like they don't have to agree. You're giving them an out. It's just my opinion, so they don't have to agree with it. You know? And it also comes from this idea that we have to be completely objective, you know? We can't use our opinions. Well, you can use your opinions, as long as you back them up with evidence, you know? If you believe that women are equal, then you back it up with evidence. You back it up with statistics, you back it up with facts, you back it up with reasoning, okay? And then yeah, it's still your opinion, but you're trying to convince other people to have the same opinion. That's the whole point of an argumentative paper, of a persuasive paper, is that you want people to agree with you. You want to change people's minds. So when you give them an out where they don't have to agree, then of course they're not going to agree. They have no reason to. You've given them no reason to. And in fact, you've given them permission to not. So it actually hinders your argument when you do that. It actually makes your argument weaker by doing that. Okay? So as long as you explain your opinion, back it up, give evidence for it, examples for it, reasoning for it, you don't have to say that it's just your opinion. That helps you be more direct in order to strengthen your rhetorical stance. Okay? So, that's it for my rules of writing. They are fairly simple, sometimes a little bit difficult when you get into actually, taking out those things or replacing those things with other things. But, it actually does make your writing so much more professional, so much more specific, so much more direct, so much more persuasive and powerful, and all of those things that you want your paper to be. So, if you have trouble following any of those rules, or you come across a stumbling point where you're like, I'm not sure how to fix this, just let me know and I will help you, okay? I'm really good at that. So, all right, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in class. Bye.